Heaven and Hell. Heaven and Hell are the most well-known afterlives in Christian tradition, representing a binary moral system. After death, the soul is judged based on the life it lived, its deeds, and adherence to the divine law. Those deemed righteous enter heaven, a realm of eternal peace, perfect happiness, and communion with God. Heaven is often imagined as a place of light, harmony, and abundance, free from suffering, death, and conflict. Conversely, souls judged sinful or morally corrupt descend to hell. Hell is depicted as a realm of eternal suffering, punishment, and separation from the divine. This system is absolute. There are no second chances or escapes. The emphasis is on moral accountability, rewarding virtue, and punishing wrongdoing. The stark contrast between heaven and hell illustrates the consequences of ethical choices and presents a clear framework for understanding life and death within Christian belief. Yomi. Yomi is the Japanese underworld, originating from Shinto belief. Unlike heaven and hell, Yomi is not a place of reward or punishment. It is simply a destination from which souls cannot return. Death in this system is final and irreversible. The Shinto myths describe Yomi as a shadowy, decaying realm where the dead exist in a stagnant, unchanging state. The most famous story involves the gods Izanagi and Izanami. After Izanami dies, Izanagi travels to Yomi to retrieve her, only to discover her body has decayed. This illustrates that Yomi is absolute, entrance is permanent, and attempts to reverse it fail. Yomi's purpose is not moral evaluation, but finality, emphasizing inevitability. It reflects a cultural view of death as a definitive separation, contrasting sharply with systems that offer cycles, tests, or progression after death. Earthbound Spirit. Earthbound spirits, commonly known as ghosts, are souls that fail to transition into an afterlife. This concept exists worldwide, often tied to unresolved attachments, unfulfilled desires, or sudden death. Unlike other systems, these spirits do not undergo judgment, trials, or cycles. They remain in the living world, unable to interact fully, often observing the living or lingering near familiar places. This state represents an incomplete transition, highlighting the idea that the journey after death can fail or become stalled. Earthbound spirits are frequently depicted as restless, sometimes visible only to the living or causing subtle disturbances. They embody the cultural notion that death is not always a clean separation, and that attachment or unfinished business can anchor a soul to the mortal realm. Unlike reincarnation or nirvana, there is no progression, only persistence. Duat. Duat is the Egyptian afterlife, emphasizing trial and moral testing rather than immediate reward or punishment. Upon death, the soul is guided through a complex underworld, encountering challenges and divine guardians. Central to Duat is the weighing of the heart against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. The heart represents the sum of one's actions, and the feather represents moral purity. If the heart is lighter than the feather, the soul is granted access to the field of reeds, an idealized paradise where life continues in a perfected form. If the heart is heavier, it is devoured by the creature Amit, resulting in complete annihilation. Duat is distinctive because it incorporates trials, evaluation, and metaphoric consequences rather than a permanent split based purely on morality. It emphasizes the importance of personal ethics, knowledge, and preparation for the journey after death. Reincarnation. Reincarnation is the belief, central to Hinduism and Buddhism, that the soul undergoes continuous cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, known as samsara. Each life is influenced by karma, the cumulative effect of actions in previous lives. Positive deeds improve the conditions of future lives, while negative actions result in more challenging circumstances. Unlike permanent judgment systems, reincarnation portrays death as temporary. The soul continues its journey, learning and evolving across lifetimes. This cyclical model reflects the understanding that life is a process of ongoing moral and spiritual development. Liberation from this cycle, or moksha, is possible but rare, emphasizing a long-term progression rather than an immediate reward or punishment. Reincarnation presents death as a stage, not a conclusion, and moral choices carry consequences that extend beyond a single lifetime. Nirvana. Nirvana represents the ultimate goal in Buddhism, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Unlike reincarnation, it is not a physical location or a temporary state. It is the cessation of suffering and the end of samsara. Achieving nirvana means the soul no longer experiences desire, attachment, or rebirth. This afterlife is unique because it is defined by the absence of continued existence in the cycle, rather than reward, punishment, or trial. It is a permanent exit from the system, a state of ultimate freedom and peace. Nirvana emphasizes spiritual mastery, enlightenment, and release, rather than external judgment. It represents the conceptual end of all cycles of life and death, illustrating a perspective where liberation, rather than morality or trial, defines the afterlife.
Across these 6 afterlives, we can see that different cultures didn't just imagine different destinations. They created entirely different systems for what happens after death. Heaven and hell represent final judgment, where your outcome is permanent and based on how you lived. Yomi shows a completely different idea, an irreversible destination, where entering means you cannot return. Duat introduces a system of trial, where the soul must be tested before reaching its outcome. The concept of an earthbound spirit suggests something else entirely, a failed transition, where the soul remains in the living world instead of moving on. Reincarnation presents death as part of an ongoing cycle, where actions shape future lives, while Nirvana represents the complete end of that cycle, a final state of liberation. Together, these systems reflect fundamentally different ways of understanding life, morality, and existence beyond death, ranging from permanent endings to endless loops to complete escape. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more explanations like this, and let me know which system you think is the most compelling or the most unsettling.